Welcome back to I'm Still Here. I'm Larry.
And I'm Heather. In 1998, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer at the age of 26. It changed everything for us, but I'm still here.
So in the previous episodes, we have talked about kind of our 4 pillars, or the 4 areas where Heather did stuff, where Heather was involved in her treatment. And so we've talked about, mentally how she did things maybe a little bit different than other people, and how physically, she did things a little bit differently than other people. Today, we're going to talk about spiritually and how that played a factor, and maybe how she did things differently, or maybe how she did things the same, and what it meant to her, and in this whole process, because we don't really know why she's still here, but she's still here.
Well, and I'm just going to say, you just said played a factor, and the honest thing is, we have no idea what made a difference, right? It was just there was a lot of things that I did and that we did medically, and so.
But these are the questions that people are sending to us, right?
And we wanted to share them with you. Exactly.
What did you do type of thing? Well, spiritually, this was involved, and it is something that you did.
Yeah. So when we talk about kind of, structuring my days, there was also a spiritual aspect to it. So I should start by saying that I was raised in a pretty conservative Baptist church. I always knew about, God and whatever, and I thought it was very natural for me to have a relationship, with God.
I was not.
And you weren't raised in a church. Right. And, we all have different perspectives. When I was diagnosed, we were going to a church which was a little less conservative, thankfully.
Little.
Than mine.
Yeah.
But it really, besides helping us, nurture any kind of relationship that we had with God, it really provided a huge community for us, right?
Yeah, and it was, it wasn't an accident that we went there. We moved up here in 95, I believe, from southern Michigan. Heather had graduated and got a job up here, and I was finishing up with college and did my student teaching up here. And on day 1 of football practice, a bunch of young men said, "Hey, coach, on Wednesdays there's dinner at church, and they just serve you dinner, and you need to come." And I don't know if we went that Wednesday, but they harped on me pretty much every day, and I just said, "Well, we got to go check out this dinner." And it started that way, and that's how we got involved there.
Yeah. So it was, a friendly place, and by the time I had been diagnosed, we were pretty established there. We were there most weeks, and we knew a fair amount of people, some of them because they were football parents. A lot of people quite a bit older than us. They were definitely mentoring us, I felt like, in a lot of ways.
We had a whole bunch of surrogate parents.
Yeah.
And we're lucky because of that, because when this went down, when she got diagnosed, you were 26 years old, so, in my mind, looking back, we were kids.
We were kids, and our families were both a couple hours away,
yeah.
So that did help to have the people here. So just from a kind of a day-to-day thing, I did start, I had told you before about my red notebook, and so part of what was in my red notebook was some verses that we had found. One of them was from a book that I had found, a bunch of verses that were focused on healing. So I had those in there, and I would read through those every day. I also had a column for answered prayers. And honestly, as I talk about this now, I don't know how I feel about all of it, But at the time, it was so reassuring to me. We definitely were looking for any sort of symbol or something that felt like it was, an answered prayer to us. And in many ways, it was something that was helpful to us. So, when you get diagnosed with cancer and you pray, it feels a lot different. I feel like
when you're in your darkest time, that's when, you reach out for anything. And it just seems like you're, and this is again just from our standpoint. We're going to talk about later that spiritual can be anything. But I guess I should just speak for myself. In that time when I was afraid, I was worried. Obviously, I was confused. And for me, this cancer thing is not. Cancer is not something you can see. Now, obviously, you can see. You can see a tumor. I get that, but it's just such a microscopic, small thing that it's kind of like I had to counter that with something
else that you couldn't see.
Yeah, the spiritual thing, and in my case, it was God, and it allowed me. It gave me the opportunity to get closer to God, to feel like He was right there in the darkest times. And when I'm talking about, it was the first days. It was those tests that you go through. It's one test after another. And in Heather's case, every test she got was the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
We got to do this test, and oh boy. And we got to then let's try this. Oh boy. And then let's do this one. And every test, I'm not kidding, was the worst case scenario. Yep. And I couldn't tell you what test it was, but I prayed harder than any human can, I think. And it actually didn't come back the worst case thing. And matter of fact, I know it was a positive test. And, that's when you're just like, oh my gosh, that is an answered prayer. It's been negative, 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 negative. And now we get this, and there it is. And that's, I'll never forget that. Never forget that.
Yeah, so I think the other thing that praying helped us do was it helped us really that were surrounding us. So we would have them come over and we would pray sometimes. Yeah. It was my way of really communicating what I was scared about. It was feeling comforted by other people. It was all of these things. And honestly,
the prayer chain, do you remember? I just popped into my head the prayer chain that went out across the world.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
And yeah, it's crazy how people in churches will pray for things and for people, right? And I think there was just for us it was a huge source of comfort. We still were scared. Absolutely.
No doubt.
So scared.
And I'm not saying, okay, this is what it was. This is the answer. We were talking about, remember, that, I know that the mental things that Heather did made a difference. Or I feel like that. The physical things, the food she ate, the exercise, all that made a difference. We haven't even talked about the medical side, which clearly, well, we think, but this was a part in it.
Yeah.
And it played a part.
Yeah. I will say, before we're going to talk a little bit about that community, but before I go any farther, there were a lot of things that from a church standpoint that I really hated and railed against.
Yeah.
I could not stand when people would come up to me in this meek voice and say, God's will be done, which to me was like, oh, you're probably going to die, but that's what it was, that's what was meant to be,
right,
kind of thing. It sounded so it just made me feel terrible in every way.
Mm-hmm.
There was also it also made me feel as if everything was out of my hands, right? And I didn't feel like my relationship with God said, hey, go home and do nothing
and lay in bed, and
I'll heal you, like
yeah.
Like you read in the Bible, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That to me was really. The other thing I think that comes with that, and maybe it's just, I don't know, just sort of something I had gathered from the church I grew up in, but it felt like when people would say things like that, about like God's will be done or whatever, it was like, if you're good enough, if you've been good enough, if you like passed the test or qualified or whatever, then maybe you would be okay. And again, that just doesn't align with what my views are on a relationship with God. So
I don't know.
Yeah. So that stuff was a little hard.
Let's talk more about the people.
Yeah, well,
and what they did for us.
I will, just one thing about the people. One more thing about the people was I would also have like little ladies in church come up to me, like, and say, "Oh, I'll help you," and I was like, "Oh, for crying out loud, I can carry my daughter, or I can do these things." So again, well intentioned, but for me, sometimes just so over the top. I couldn't do it.
I forgot about that.
But
you fragile little soul.
But
so I mean, I want to go back to like the Wednesday, these cooking girls.
Yeah, we called them the cooking girls.
I think they called themselves the cooking girls.
Well, whatever I don't know.
Okay, I don't
They're
know.
The cooking girls.
I think they named themselves. But there's this group of ladies, women who on Wednesdays would spend most of the day cooking, and then invite the entire community to come in and just eat. No strings attached, just come eat.
Yeah.
And it started with them feeding their kids. All their kids were in sports, and so they picked one night a week where they could all eat together.
I think it was youth group.
Yeah, and it was coupled with a youth group night. So it gave them some food, and that exploded into them feeding the community, and it was unbelievable. Well, these cooking girls,
Yeah, these women were, they were so helpful to me, and they just kind of came around me right away. And it was honestly like having a whole team of, I don't know, aunts or somebody was just like, how do I help you? But one thing that would happen is that they would come and get Sydney every Wednesday morning, and I would go do my routine. On the other days, she was with Lois, and Lois was also from church. Yeah. She took the other day. She was our regular babysitter anyway. And but on Wednesdays, Sid was a cooking girl, and she would go with them, and she would, hang out with them in the kitchen, and then we would all meet in this little town for lunch every day or every Wednesday. And it was a great way for me to have some interaction with people that I knew cared about me. Also, I didn't have to fill them in on everything. Mm-hmm. They were along they kind of saw a lot of things. They did more than just that. They were the people they would clean our house for us before we came home, or while we were going on a chemo treatment, or they would step in on a day that I was not feeling well.
They put food in the fridge,
would watch
in the freezer.
Sydney, yes.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, there's, and you guys that have been diagnosed, and you maybe you've already, beat this thing, and people come up to you and they're like, hey, anything I can do. Yeah. You know what? Anything I can do. And you go, okay, hey, I really appreciate that. But they don't really mean anything I can do. And you would never even ask them for anything I can do. But it's something, and they're well intended in saying that. But these ladies, when they said anything I can do, they meant
they just thought of things that they could do without us really even saying anything, which is really great. Yes. And we, over time, when we've supported families, through crisis, and honestly, like, we have gotten together with friends and taken a meal every week for months.
Yeah. Not
for 2 weeks, for months. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just something that kind of provides what we hope is some relief, for a longer period.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, you can't thank the cooking girls enough. And for me, there's a lot of men in that church that really spiritually and socially supported me. And they lifted me up in the way that my coaching staff couldn't. It was a different relationship, and I needed that. And they did that for me, and I'll forever be grateful. Ivy didn't have cancer, but being the husband of somebody going through this, I did need supported. And I didn't know that, but I did need supported. And they did that, and just unbelievable.
Well, and one thing too, when you have support outside of somebody else, you don't need me to support you.
It's
right?
True.
And that's so we've talked about, I think, a little of this, but like, I feel like it's so important not to make the person going through it be the supportive one, right?
No doubt.
It's really important. I needed him to support me, and therefore you needed a release the other way also. It couldn't always come back the same way, right? That would have been too hard for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know what else to say with spirituality other than to say that we know it looks different, and we all are in different phases. And
Yeah, when I say this spiritual being that I needed to connect with, to in the thought of you know what, you're an all-powerful God, and if you can do this, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to pray to you. I am going to give you the shot to do this type of thing. That doesn't, your spiritual whatever it is can be whatever it is. Not only that, your community that will support you can be whatever it is. It doesn't have to be on a Wednesday at a church or a Sunday at a church. It can be whatever it is for you, but I think it's important. I know it helped us with our parents being 2.5 hours away. They were ridiculously supportive parents. Both of us have unbelievable parents. But they were far away. And I think you need that. You need that community. Well, maybe you don't need it, but boy, it sure helped us. So,
well, I think, like when I think about spirituality and faith, I think that maybe for me now, I'm like, I wish we could just not have, well, in my situation, there were so many rules about it growing up.
Yeah.
And what I realized through cancer and as I continue to evolve is that, like, it is, we have a spiritual side to us. I think there's a longing to know what else is out there, and to, some part of us, there's faith, right?
No doubt.
In whatever that is. So I just believe that, again, anything that we can do that is kind of for that and not against it, is was a good thing for me. I will say also, though, like, we were certainly not, we were the ones who were saying, if you, then I'll. You, like, you're for sure, like, not going.
No, I was doing every deal there was in the book.
Brokering a deal and whatever you could. Like,
just at that point, I was just pulling at straws. I didn't want my wife to die, and everything was leading down that path.
Yes, it really
at the time. So it was
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, and I think for me, I found a relationship with God, to be helpful, especially in the times that I was alone. And like, I did a hospital stay, that I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and I don't think anything felt darker and more lonely than hospital in the middle of the night, you know? So,
especially with a long stay.
With a long stay, and with, again, sometimes...
And not even knowing a week of that because you were so delirious.
Well, but, like, I was awake this night, but I had just found out that, like, I had pneumonia, and I was just like, no, and that's when I felt like I was fighting with God. I was like, no, I'm not going to live through cancer to die of pneumonia. Like, this is not going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
But I think the opportunity to talk to God has been helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
All along.
Yeah. And we'll figure out this church thing.
Yeah. And I'll say, we're now.
That's where the struggle is, and we'll there's a number of things, but there's a lot of rules, and some of those rules we just don't agree.
Well,
with.
it's not just that. I think for me, it's like, let's not pretend to be perfect people when we're in this building, and to be so judgmental of everything, and to pretend like we don't have past lives, or we've never made a mistake or anything like that, and the judgment that gets passed on individuals, but groups of people and everything else, I think, is what I struggle with, for sure. And I think,
stay tuned for Heather's next book.
Yeah, that's coming. But I guess, when we talk about body, mind, and spirit, it's always there. And it really is a piece of us. And I was listening to something the other day, and she was talking about bodies, and really that we just need to consider them a house for our souls. And that soul, to me, that's the spiritual side, right?
No doubt.
The longing to connect and know. Maybe it's not know, but just that feeling that we get that there's something else out there.
So I hope that helped us going through, just touching on it. Obviously, we didn't spend every little thing we did with this, but spiritual was a very important part for Heather, for me, for us getting down that road and getting beyond, the treatment part. So I thank our church 1,000 times over because
Our old church.
our old church.
Yeah.
No, yeah, because you made life so much easier for us, and just I look back now and yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I thank you too because I'm still here.
There we go. Peace.